Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar with our good friend David Troxel to Prestige and the team here. David has been just a great friend of ours through the many years, working with us on our Expressions memory care as well as our assisted living products and programming. David, I think it was back in 2009 that you joined with
Mhm.
Prestige. And you've been such a good friend to us, working with all the wonderful things that we do here at Prestige with programming and product and engagement. And so we're grateful to have you with us today. My name is Angie France. I am excuse me, I have a new title. It is the Resident Experience and Education Manager with Prestige. And so we have 24 communities that we work with assisted living, memory care, and independent living. And so we really enjoy engaging with all of you. We enjoy engaging with our residents, but we also enjoy engaging with different speakers throughout the year. And this quarter, we're very blessed to have David with us today. We hope that you will join us for future webinars. We always have those advertised on our homepage, prestigecare.com, as well as many of our Facebook pages for our communities. And if you do go to prestigecare.com, you can click on any of those locations to have a look at what we offer and just some of the things that are happening. It gives you information about our calendars and our newsletters and all the wonderful engagement that's happening, whether it's from programming around games and creativity, but we also do a lot of things around education for our residents to continue on the adventure of aging. And so that's always our goal is to continue that adventure. We are in Washington and Oregon. And so for those of you in Oregon, you might actually see one of our billboards along the highway and byways of Oregon, talking about our communities and about our Make New Friends program within our communities. And also, it also says your besties live here. And so we really do really embrace getting people out of isolation and making those connections. We think that when we have curious minds, it creates connected lives. And so we like to feed that curiosity, but also our goal is to really help our residents get to know each other and become really good neighbors. Actually, Won't You Be My Neighbor Day is on Friday, so I hope you're celebrating that wherever you are. And we want to embrace you and celebrate you being a neighbor in one of our communities if that's something that you're interested in. We're always available to give you great information. We have community relations directors in each of our communities to give you that information, be a source for you. If it's now or down the road, we're there to hold your hand through the process and help you really experience what it's like to live in one of our communities. So, David, back in the day, we joined together to develop a lot of product and programming that is really engaging to our residents. But we also know that people have a lot of questions if they're still in their own home environment. And so we want to help each of you that are joining us outside of Prestige to be a resource for you. We are always here happy to ask questions, or to ask questions too, and we will answer them for you as the best we can. And so when we brought David along today, we knew that you were maybe having some questions centered around what does it mean or when is it time to move into assisted living or memory care? And so, David, I'm going to let you take it from here. I'm going to let you do a little more broad introduction about your background and maybe some of the adventures you've been on recently, celebrating
Thanks, Sanji.
life and senior living.
Well, I can't believe we've been working together now for almost 20 years. So I do expect a 20-year button or pin, Angie, as part of the relationship.
Yeah.
But, I'm delighted to be with you all today. I'll put up my PowerPoint momentarily. I live in Sacramento, as Angie said, and have been honored to be part of the Prestige family for many years. Their memory care program called Expressions is really very innovative and contemporary and very much supports the work I do around the best friends approach to Alzheimer's care. And as I'll show you today, it's pretty fascinating because having been in this field for 30 years plus, it's very exciting to see that there's actually a growing research and evidence base for the power of socialization and activity and engagement and all the things you can benefit when you're going to hopefully a good memory care program. So with that and no further ado, Angie, I think I'll just jump into my presentations. We have some time at the end for if there are any questions or comments. again, thank you for hosting me on this and recording this for all the people out there who will, I'm sure, watch it virtually or on the Angie YouTube channel, whatever that looks like. So
And
let me go
David, I
ahead.
will share too that we will take questions in the chat, and we will
Oh,
answer questions
great.
at the end. We want to keep you running through the
Oops.
process, and then we will share those at the end.
Yes, thank you. If you can keep track of those, Angie,
I
because
will.
multitasking is not one of my strengths,
Totally fine. I
even
got
though
you.
I do that all the time. So, all right. Well, again, welcome to our webinar today, which I've entitled Turning a No into a Yes, When and How to Make the Move to Memory Care. And I just want to share with you that even though we have a specific topic about senior living and memory care, if you are a professional in the field, if you are a family member just starting out, I think there'll be a lot of good content for you today, even if you're not quite ready to make that move into memory care. Hopefully, there'll be some good content for you going forward. So, as Angie said, I've been doing this quite a while. I've written now, I think, 8 books in the field of aging and dementia care, notably a book called The Best Friends Approach to Dementia Care. Currently, I'm in a fairly new role as the interim vice president for cognitive health with the Institute on Aging in San Francisco, a very well regarded a nonprofit that does adult day center care and a variety of elder care services. I'm involved with Alzheimer's International, and my brand new book is in that probably the lower bottom right-hand corner, The Best Friends Staff, Learning to Deliver Exceptional Dementia Care. It's a professional book for any of you who are involved in programs, staff training, program development. And my longtime writing partner, Virginia Bell, and I, one of the things that makes us very distinctive is we have a lot of stories in our books from real people, so to speak, real people living with dementia, people who are caregivers, and in this case, professionals. And Angie, I'm delighted that you are actually in our new book. So thank you, as is Prestige. And like many of you again on this webinar, I've also been a family member for my mom, Dorothy, who passed away with Alzheimer's disease. So today we're going to offer a brief update on the growing evidence base supporting the benefits of activities and engagement and structured programs offered by senior living providers, talk about decision making, share some ideas about when you might want to make the move and how to make the move, talk about some of the benefits, including safety around memory care. There's so much financial exploitation of elders these days, particularly people with some diminished cognitive capacities. I think that's an important thing to talk about. And then if you are a current family with a family member in memory care or assisted living, kind of how to make the most of the visit. So hopefully this will be a good program for you all. I thought I would kick us off because there's so much exciting news here with some evidence-based and evidence-influenced practices about how we create a good quality of life for a person living with cognitive loss. And not necessarily in order of importance, I thought I would start off with music. It turns out that music and song lyrics actually live in a different part of the brain than words and language. And I'm sure many of you have noticed how music can be so therapeutic for the person living with dementia. I know with my own mother, I kept like a smart speaker in her room and we'd play favorite songs, singing, all of that I think evokes memories and emotion and I think leads to greater happiness. And I'm not just saying this because here, for example, is one study I put up that shows how evidence supports that music can reduce agitation, improve mood, and enhance communication. Uh, Functional MRI studies actually also show that the parts of the brain that kind of process rhythm and music actually seem to be preserved with people with dementia longer than words and language. So I think anything you can do with music at home, for those of you who are still at home, again, buy one of those, Google speakers or Amazon speakers. If your mother always loved country western music, play that, surround her with the music, particularly before taking a shower or bath, that can relax them as well. One of my heroes, and Angie's heard me talk about him many times, the late Dr. Oliver Sacks, who was an amazing neurologist and writer for The New Yorker. He wrote a whole book about music and the brain. And I love this quote from his book where he says that music can lift us out of depression or move us to tears. But for many of my neurological patients, music is even more. It can provide access, even when no medication can, to movement, to speech, to life. For them, music is not a luxury, but a necessity. So again, not only is this something that works well for those of you who have someone in memory care, but at home as well, and evidence-based. I love art. I've always loved color and art, even though I'm not an artist. And I think this is such a sweet slide to show you how people can get a sort of sense of purpose and achievement and joy from doing art. And again, with art therapy research, some very recent studies that art can support your sense of identity, help you feel a sense of purpose, and allow for a great emotional expression. The benefits of art therapy include reduced anxiety, improved social connection, and enhanced quality of life. Again, this is something you could certainly try to do at home, but within an assisted living or independent living or memory care, that group process of creating art together can be very special. And of course, we are seeing art therapists and art programs being integrated into day programs and into dementia-friendly communities. One more study, again, in research, often researchers will like their project is to look at 30 other published papers or just look at the last 10 years of papers and research and see what the conclusions are. And this one I thought was very, very cool. Art therapy improves cognitive function and thinking, reduces agitation and anxiety, improves the ability for people to brush their teeth or take their meds or eat the activities of daily living, we call it in our industry, and does seem to improve quality of life. One thing I recommend, and Angie, I know Prestige has really had a lot of fun with this over the years, but I love collage particularly. I recommend collage because it's very tactile. Even someone late in dementia, you can take their hand and hold and press and glue things down. Earlier stage people can draw, create, plan a theme of the collage. And collage feels very adult to me. I love to keep it adult and use, the watercolor markers, things like that, versus just doing crayons and simple things. I think this is a very sweet picture because, again, they're not doing Mickey Mouse, which may not just feel appropriate for many adults, but they're doing more abstract butterflies, nature, etc. I think the next thing, and again, we'll jump into why memory care in a few minutes, but I'm hoping that this is the part of my presentation that will give you all some ideas of things you can implement either at your Prestige building, if you're part of the Prestige family, or at home. But exercise. There's a lot of work out there now about what might prevent Alzheimer's disease, delay the onset of Alzheimer's or dementia, slow it down. And it turns out that of all of this research out there, exercise might be the most important. People who exercise regularly may get Alzheimer's disease later in life than people who do not. And if you have Alzheimer's again and you stay active physically, it may slow it down. So here's a study that talks about people who indeed are living in senior living and memory care, regular multi-component exercise, doing different kinds of activities, improve physical, functional, and some cognitive outcomes. In this case, again, even structured programs 2 to 3 times a week have proven effective. I really recommend, if at all possible, exercise twice a day. It can be some chair yoga, some stretching, some movement, some walking. Again, I'll go off the stop share for just a minute, Angie, and say that, I know with my own mother, who had Alzheimer's and passed away in 2008, I would sometimes say to her, Mom, I'm feeling a bit wobbly today, but I could sure use a walk. Would you come with me? I need someone to hold on to. Again, a little bit of a finesse, maybe not me being totally truthful, but you see, I didn't say, now, Mom, the doctor says you need to take a walk. Come on, let's go. Because, people with dementia are just like the rest of us. If I push them too hard, they'll push back. But by me saying, would you help me stay fit? Would you help me exercise? You see, then she immediately said yes. So again, these little finesses in our best friends books, we have a family book called A Dignified Life, The Best Friends Approach to Alzheimer's Care, that I think many of the Prestige buildings have copies of. We talk about being a friend, preserving dignity, saving face, and often people with dementia want to be helpful, and it's sort of a way to turn that no into a yes. I'll go back to my presentation now. Here we go. Oops, 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 oops. Okay. All right. Um, Finally, kind of as I think about, again, some of the research out there, I have to say what has been personally so satisfying to me is the growing base of evidence that the brain loves company, this evidence base for the power of socialization. It turns out that people who have friends, even people who are married or partnered, people who belong to clubs or organizing, we believe there's some evidence that they get Alzheimer's disease later in life than the loners. Now, if you're an introvert, don't despair. It doesn't mean you're going to get Alzheimer's. It just means that this kind of engagement or socialization can be what we call neuroprotective. So, a couple of studies here from the Lancet, the famous British medical magazine. Higher levels of social engagement were associated with a slower cognitive decline over 5 years, giving you maybe 5 years of greater resiliency. Social interaction supported that executive thinking, function, and memory. Another study in the gerontologist, residents participating in structured group programs, music, art, discussion groups showed improved mood, better attention, and slower functional decline. Again, keep your family member active. If you are still at home, do your best to invite people into the home for activities, take drives, go, be with grandchildren, be with pets, visit a zoo, keep them active. This is, I think, a huge reason why I encourage you to consider not waiting and waiting and waiting to use services. A great adult day program can be very therapeutic. If you do hire someone in the home, be sure they're lively and engaged and just not on their cell phone all day. And of course, if you're choosing memory care assisted living, find one that is activity rich. Overall, I have to say, despite the fact that we know Alzheimer's disease is so difficult, being a caregiver is emotionally, physically, financially stressful, there is some good news. Stigma around Alzheimer's disease and dementia is steadily declining. Years ago, people kind of were ashamed of talking about this. We now know that it impacts 1 in 3 families. And of course, we remember President Reagan announced his diagnosis of Alzheimer's. So people are aware of services. There's a lot more out there, many more services, which is great. Everything from physicians who know a lot more about dementia, neurology groups, senior centers, all sorts of resources on the web, including the Alzheimer's Association. As I said earlier, there's a strong evidence base. We are learning really the way to be with somebody with dementia, keep them physically healthy, keep them active, keep them engaged, and that does tend to foster cooperation and reduce some of those dementia behaviors. Lifestyle choices can protect brain health. And again, lots of cool things happening. We actually have a lot of new medications and drugs in what we call the research pipeline. I don't have my numbers. Let me double check if I have this one slide here. No, I don't. I think I dropped it from this presentation, but I'll mention, and Angie, maybe you can even put this in the chat room. But this one physician, Jeffrey or Jeff Cummings, Cummings, publishes an annual review of the research pipeline of drugs in the discovery process. And I think there was something like 160 medications in our research pipeline in the US, and about a third of them were in phase 3 clinical trials where they're being tested on people, hopefully safely. So we think there'll be better and newer drugs coming to market soon. By the way, over 50,000 people in the US participated in clinical trials as volunteers, which I think is really quite extraordinary. So again, good news. We understand that therapeutic healing environments are powerful. What creates a good environment for people living with memory loss? Well, the physical space, good lighting, outdoor space, natural lighting, the staff who hopefully have a lot of heart and smiles and engagement, activities, and what I like to call sometimes relationship-centered care, where you really know the person well. Evidence supports that structured activities in assisted living are good for the brain and good for the body. Again, what are the secrets to success? One slide I've shown in previous webinars, but I think it's still very, very relevant. This great slide from Dr. Michael McLeod, who's now retired, but really well-regarded geriatrician at UC Davis in Sacramento, near Sacramento. Basically, he says that Alzheimer's disease and these other dementias, like Lewy body dementia, vascular dementias, they don't travel alone. Alzheimer's, again, and the other dementias often come with other challenges. And if you miss them, if you leave them untreated, they worsen impairment. So for those of you involved in at a prestige building or families caring for someone, be aware that all of these things on the right-hand side of the slide here are things that people sometimes present with besides their dementia. And these are often addressable or treatable. And if you miss them, it just drags the person down. So be sure, particularly if someone's been living by themselves, are they taking their medications correctly? Are they taking over-the-counter the things that aren't good for the brain? Are they drinking too much? How's their brain health, their blood pressure? Are they having small strokes? Depression, pain, malnutrition, hormone, thyroid issues. blood sugar and diabetes. There's research out there that people who are pre-diabetic or have diabetes, that if they're not taking care of themselves, monitoring their blood sugar levels, that can be an enemy of cognition. Hearing, visual impairments. It's a very kind of an odd piece of research, but there's been a number of correlating studies that people who need hearing aids but won't wear them, that can isolate you and potentially, I guess, reduce some of the stimulation of the brain and make you at greater risk for dementia. And visual impairments, it's as simple as, as someone wearing dirty glasses, or maybe they live in a senior living building and they're wearing the wrong glasses, somebody else's glasses. That can cause challenges. B12, D deficiencies, sleep issues, urinary tract infections, rather notoriously, and of course, loneliness and isolation can also be very, very important to look at. One, I think, tremendous benefit of senior living and memory care is that there is structured activity, there is more healthcare monitoring. We are aware about depression being an enemy of the brain and pain. So you want to just be in a situation where you're addressing these concerns. Depression, particularly, the Alzheimer's Association says that 40% of people with Alzheimer's will experience a round of depression. If you suspect that, how do you treat depression? Well, fresh air, sunshine, pet therapy, purposeful activities, art, music. If that still isn't helping, definitely the antidepressant medications are sometimes very effective in seniors. And pain. If I have a bad toothache, I know to call my dentist. But if you have dementia, you may not be able to connect the dots and just be living in that pain. So if you do suspect your family member's in pain, you want to address that the best you can. Sometimes even with like an extended release Tylenol or something like that, that can be very, very helpful. Bottom line, and I love this concept, but my mother's neurologist in Santa Barbara, Dr. Harbaugh, said, David, Alzheimer's is like a slow and lazy river. So most of these symptoms are rather slow and progressive. If someone's having like a sudden change of behavior, it doesn't typically mean their Alzheimer's has gotten worse per se. It means that in fact they're sick, that something else is going on. So again, thank you for letting me kind of set the stage of my talk. I always like to give some practical information that can help you wherever you are. Let's sort of reflect on the journey as a caregiver, as some of you may be thinking about memory care and kind of where you are. I will say you've kind of met one family, everyone's different. Some people have an extended series of siblings who help out, others are all by themselves. As we know in the States, there are people who live alone, many people who live alone, and there are people who don't have family or who are estranged from family. But there are some common experiences. Caregiving is tough stuff. It's emotionally, physically, and financially stressful. And because Alzheimer's and these other dementias are progressive, almost always the person begins to have more and more care needs. Certainly, one thing to be aware of is planning ahead. With dementia, it does need to be slow and progressive. You have time to work on certain things. So be sure to get your legal and financial affairs in order. Yeah, even with married couples, you want to have a power of attorney for your finances for each other. The healthcare directives, all of that can be important. Learn all you can about dementia. I mean, thank you for being part of this class today, but knowledge is power. Utilize a continuum of care. Not every community, I'm sure in Oregon and Washington, where there are many rural communities, you may not have a day program near you, for example, or a local support group. But do try to find out what is there, because early on, I'd love for you to be going to some workshops, considering a support group, maybe having a little part-time help in the home or going to the day program. Once you get your family member engaged in services, I think it becomes much easier if later you do need to make a placement for memory care or assisted living. Eventually, of course, because someone becomes often incontinent or have other issues, may be a bit of an escape artist, it does sometimes become very hard to keep the person at home. So don't wait to use services. Make a plan ahead. All of these things can be very, very good. You don't want to have to make a decision in an emergency. Again, what are some other reasons people choose to make a placement? Well, managing medication, personal care, hygiene, someone who might become incontinent, all of that can be very difficulty. How do you manage weight loss, keeping them healthy, and that lack of movement exercise increases fall risk. I love this slide here because I've been in so many homes when someone lives by themselves, or sometimes even with an elderly caregiver, and you see, hostess Twinkies and ho-hos and sometimes some liquor in the fridge, and not many healthy things. So, again, we probably don't talk about enough, but one reason to think about senior living is to get that healthier lifestyle and diet. Again, this idea of people living alone, there's some interesting research happening at UC San Francisco about this, but there are, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people with dementia around the country living by themselves. That person can become increasingly isolated. So we want to, do our best to invite them into community and have these dementia-friendly communities. And sadly, safety issues. We know there's issues around falls, or maybe someone scalding themselves on hot water, or maybe getting mixed up with something that's toxic and, having that in their food. But I have to tell you, more and more, one of my great concerns these days is the financial abuse. A dear friend of mine, Betsy, who lived in the San Francisco Bay Area, she had early dementia. We thought she was doing okay, on her own. Lived in a kind of very supportive neighborhood. But we discovered that she got one of those bogus IRS phone calls and wired $10,000 to somebody. And of course, pardon me, once that money was sent by Betsy, we were never able to retrieve it. So I want you just to be aware that if you're an adult child and maybe your parents are living near you, or you have a family member with dementia, judgment becomes impaired. And even people who said, David, my father watched every penny he ever earned, he'd never be taken advantage of. You sometimes discover these poor decision makings, and it might even sadly be lending money to friends and family, which they normally would not have done. So be careful about some of these safety concerns as well, even including, of course, falls and exit seeking. Now, I've talked to many people. Just a couple of days ago, I talked to a family where mom has moved in, and I want to just applaud any of you who are living with your family member with dementia. I think that can be very, very wonderful to, be there for your family member. But of course, the burnout piece can be very, very tough. So, just be aware that, doing this all by yourself inevitably leads to a lot of exhaustion, loss of social connection, and fear of the future. I was recently with a friend of mine who has mild cognitive impairment, and even though I work in the field and kind of understand the dynamics, her forgetfulness of, repeating herself, asking questions, the confusion that comes now, when are we doing this and when are we doing that? I have to tell you, it kind of took a toll on me. It was hard to kind of organize my life while I was staying with my friend, and trying to kind of keep my focus and not get a bit frustrated when you made a plan and 3 minutes later it was sort of undone. So I have a lot of empathy for all of you involved in caregiving, having been a caregiver very recently, and also with my family history as well. And of course, why Alzheimer's disease is such a challenging issue. The American Public Health Association said Alzheimer's is actually the most expensive illness in the US, more expensive than heart disease and cancer, because it is so slow and progressive and challenging. And, I want to be clear, not everybody with Alzheimer's or other dementias has really difficult, challenging behaviors, but many of them do. And if you're caring for someone who doesn't want to take a shower, has some paranoia or apathy. They just won't go out and leave the house and do things. And again, that's an area that until I really began to experience it as a caregiver, I didn't quite realize how debilitating that apathy can be. If you're a family member and your spouse just won't go anywhere, if they say no to everything, only want to be home, that can be really difficult for you as a care partner, particularly if you really don't want to leave them by themselves. Aggression, delusions. I like this definition of delusion. If you don't know what the definition is, a fixed false idea. I lent you $1,000, you never paid me back, or maybe they think you're a different family member. Those are ones we often kind of have to kind of wait out and roll with it and be reassuring. Hiding things, hoarding, rearranging household items. My mother, when she was still at home before she went to memory care for 3 years, I mean, oh my goodness, she was a master at hiding her purse and hiding things. And my father and I would look and look and look. We were very lucky. We ended up with one caregiver named Rhonda who worked for us part-time. She had the Sherlock Holmes kind of magic talent for finding things, and she would inevitably find my mother's watch or things like that. But again, it can be very difficult and challenging. So again, we want to recognize burnout, all of this as well, and even just frankly, some Really challenging situations. Years ago, I talked to a caregiver who lived in Morro Bay, and her mother was at home and living with the daughter. And the mother was rather paranoid. And so she would slip these notes to the postal workers, to the grocery store works, call the police, I'm being held hostage. My daughter has stolen my money. Well, in fact, the daughter was very ethical and very caring. The mother just had a lot of paranoia. But the daughter said, I really suffered because even though I explained to friends and neighbors and, the powers that be about my mother's situation, I don't know that they always believed me. And so she kind of ended up a bit under suspicion until, more work was done to educate the community. So ultimately, what are the three biggest enemies I found for caregivers to, end up having to get help? Lack of sleep, if your family member's up at night, the personal care, the continence care, and of course, sometimes even the best caregivers become the bad guy. You're the one saying no, you're the one, maybe taking away the car or the money, and they may not understand why. So that can be very, very challenging. I will say there's a lot of good material that I'm sure Angie and Prestige can get you. My own books about dementia care, the Alzheimer's Association. We want to do our very best not to become the bad guy. Blame the doctor. Be empathetic. Show that you care. So you don't want to necessarily say, if mom says President Eisenhower is doing a great job, you say, Mom, I do, not what's wrong with you, he's dead. Maybe your family member has a lot of paranoia about money and you're paying all of your dad's bills. Well, instead of just arguing with him and denying that you're doing that, what you can do is perhaps write out the checks, get all the bills ready, ask your father to review them and kind of check your math. And then maybe your father can still, even if it's a scrawl, sign his name on the check. And you get some rubber stamps and have him sign the invoices paid and initial them. And again, you're still doing all this work. He doesn't even necessarily know what he's looking at, but you see, you've helped him feel productive and needed and in control. And maybe when you mail all those checks out that your father sort of helped you with, you say, Dad, thank you so much for helping me with your accounts. What would I do without you? So again, I think part of the challenge for all of us as caregivers, professional or family, is sort of changing the dynamic, having that empathy, being understanding. And of course, again, it doesn't happen all that often, but there are times where I've advised caregivers, you need to really step back. Maybe let another family member deal with it. But if your family member does have a lot of anger and upset toward you, again, take your break, give yourself that important respite that can be very valuable. So how can assisted living and memory care help? Well, obviously, there's lots of challenges and not every situation is perfect. But I will say what has been surprising to me, having been in this field so long, it's pretty amazing that senior living does tend to work well for people with dementia. I think sometimes they're on better behavior with us than they are the family members, or they kind of are more polite and willing to get a shower from a caregiver sometimes, a paid caregiver, than their own family members. But basically, a company like Prestige, assisted living companies, now your family member has a support team well trained in dementia care. Again, healthcare management and monitoring supports optimal health, optimal life. And instead of you having to struggle with continence care and things like that, the staff can do the heavy lifting. Your relationship, your caregiving responsibilities doesn't go away when someone moves into memory care, but hopefully it allows you to have more social visits, more friendly visit, go to ice cream socials, do things, and not be quite as involved in everyday care. Again, your family member responds to a therapeutic, healing environment. This socialization with friends and neighbors evokes old social skills and manners. And it's quite surprising. My mother, we called her neighbor in memory care, her next door neighbor, and they would have tea together and talk. And my mother enjoyed that. My mother was never interested in, sort of silliness and old TV shows and things like that. But one time I walked in and she was watching old episodes of Hee Haw and having a delightful time. So sometimes they kind of forget that they don't do that, and they're actually more open to experiences. Maybe Angie, you could talk about this a little bit later, but we've had families come to Prestige or other organizations I've worked with, and the caregiver will say in all good earnestness. Now, my mother won't do this. She doesn't like this. She won't do that. She can't do this. And guess what? Mother does all of that. Again, they're very much in the moment. So again, this sort of social atmosphere can be very, very positive. And as I alluded to earlier, having these sort of structured activity programs along with, in the moment, these little 30-second activities throughout the day, music, art, conversation, good food, talking about recipes, talking about favorite foods, trivia, learning, exercise, being outdoors, tying things to social history and life story. Prestige does a very good job capturing like a little mini memoir on each person and encouraging the staff to know the residents well. And doing this, again, has this new research base, this value that we feel so strongly about, and keeps the person engaged and happy. I'll mention my own mother. She spoke fluent French, was in memory care in Sacramento, and one caregiver came across a set of old-fashioned vocabulary flashcards. We used to learn language and vocabulary not on the web, but you'd have a card that said cat on one side in English and maybe cat in Spanish on the other side, or a house and chateau or whatever. And so this caregiver found these cards and asked my mother, Dorothy, would you be my French professor? And they would just take 5 or 10 minutes every day and work through some of these flashcards. And my mother just felt, I think, so powerful being Madam Professor and having this purpose. And of course, my mother became very fond of this young caregiver. So if my mother did need a shower, guess what? This caregiver, my mother never said no to. Again, these are little things we do in memory care that you can also model at home as well with your family member. Few other things, what is the difference between assisted living and memory care? Well, I'm sure different buildings have different ideas, but basically, in assisted living, people still kind of organize their own day and their lives. They get help here and there, but they're still often kind of moving around that community on their own. In memory care, we have safety systems to reduce the risk of unsafe exit seeking, specialized staff training. Again, in assisted living, maybe they'll get a calendar and they just pick their own activities for the week or the day. In memory care, we knock on that door, we cue, we invite, we encourage, we try 2 or 3 times. If we know someone enjoys gardening and there's a gardening class or a pet therapy, we really do try 3 times to turn that no into yes, so to speak, and invite them in. And of course, in memory care, activities are a bit different. In independent living, most activities have a beginning, middle, and end. In memory care, it's the journey, not the destination. So maybe you're playing bingo, which can be very intense, but you stop and you sing happy birthday halfway through. Or maybe a resident's wearing a really pretty yellow dress. You talk about favorite colors in that pretty yellow dress and how it reminds you of spring. So again, with memory care, it does have a different complexion, different flavor for activities. I'll share with you a story about Joyce. When my mother lived in her independent living apartment, she was happy, but as her memory began to fail, she struggled to communicate with other residents and had trouble ordering off the menu. Now in memory care, she seems happier and less stressed. The staff is there to help her. She seems more at peace in the smaller, well-lit, and comfortable environment. She's a retired nurse, and I like the fact that they call her Nurse Joyce. That perks her up. I was so afraid it wouldn't work, but mom is happy, and I don't have the constant struggles with her anymore about taking a shower or changing. We are having more fun as mother and son. So, again, how these things can be very, very helpful. So, let's say you've decided on memory care. What now? Well, how to make the move. There's really no simple answer. And I've met families who say, Mom, the house needs to be tended for termites, and that's why they make the move, as well as families who, with the second bullet point, just start with the truth, share your concerns. I'm persuaded that I like to always start that way. You don't want to be so overtly not telling the truth to family members most of the time, makes us feel uncomfortable. At the same time, sometimes we know that judgment's impaired and we can't be too literal or ever there be no one ever living in memory care. So I'd say start with the truth, sharing your concerns. Speak from your heart. You don't want to put together a 37-point PowerPoint. Here are the reasons you have to move to memory care. About your love, your concern, your happiness, they'll meet new friends. All of those things to be good. Keep it simple. Sometimes blaming the doctor. And I love this fourth bullet here. Mother, your doctor wants you to be here right now. You need to build your strength. I think that's a very classic, great line or argument to share with people with dementia. Almost puts the memory care neighborhood kind of a rehab mode. It could be very, very good. And I will say, going up to the right, sometimes we can't prevent people from making bad decisions, and sometimes people are legally competent, even though they shouldn't be living alone. We can't force them to unless they're truly a risk to themselves or others. So I always say that if you have a family member that just won't make the move, even though you know they should, or won't have an in-home worker, or whatever it is, make your game plan. Maybe visit two or three buildings, decide where mom would move to, fill out some initial paperwork, have your plan. Sadly, there will be, if someone's living by themselves, that inevitable emergency. Maybe there's a fall that hopefully isn't too bad, or they flood out the house with, the bathtub overrunning, or a minor automobile accident if they're still driving, God forbid. But you see, when this happens, or maybe mother gets pneumonia and has to go to the hospital, you want to be able to strike. You want to be able to move her from the hospital right to memory care, again, for her kind of rehab, so to speak, or get that in-home worker in. Again, be nimble, be quick, have your plans together because there is that opportunity to sometimes get services going. And of course, staff at Prestige or the Alzheimer's Association can help you with some of these additional best practices. Even my own mother, Dorothy, I have to admit that I didn't really know memory care would work. She loved her home, was very social, and had lots of, antiques and things like that. But honestly, when we made the move, she adjusted very well and seemed to be happy there and have friends and was very, very much in the moment. So I think that was certainly very, very helpful. Again, I don't think we talk enough in this industry about how to visit. I was in a building a few weeks ago, and one new family member, the wife, was coming like 7 hours a day, 6 days a week. And, I don't want to tell people what to do. That's her right, of course, to do that. But I tried to at least suggest to her that, that it's okay to take care of yourself, skip a day here and there. The staff have it covered. I just want to share with you my view is that short visits are okay. Sometimes you might want to go by and maybe tell your husband, "Hey, I'm on my way to the beauty parlor," some place that he would never want to go, and do that, or I'm on my way to meet my friends for golf, whatever. But short visits are okay. When you greet your family member, be sure to again show that heart, that emotion, the smiles, the hugs, the open arms of welcome. I always love Maya Angelou's quote that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. I think that's very powerful. Bring a gift or small treat. Be sure to go outside. I think we don't go outside enough with people with dementia. If it's a nice patio, a nice sunny day, ask the staff to, get you some lemonade or get you some straw hats or put you under an umbrella. But that's very therapeutic. It's spiritual. It's sensory. Bring a project to work on, flowers to arrange, a present to wrap. I used to keep wrapping paper in my mom's room and we wrap presents together, a photo album or scrapbook, a catalog to pick out maybe your niece's 16th birthday, birthday cards to write. All of those things are very, very good. And again, always be sure when you're visiting to remind the staff about, your family members' past and interest. All of that can be very, very helpful. So as we kind of wind down our webinar today, I want to be sure to have time for discussions or questions. I just want to thank you all for being part of this discussion. Thank my friend Angie, my friends at Prestige as well. And I want to honor you all with the words of this famous dementia researcher from the 1980s and early 90s, I believe. He passed away a bit too young, sadly, Dr. Tom Kitwood. And I love what he said here. He said that caregivers, which was the main focus of his research, caregivers are physicians of the human spirit. So I want to thank you all for all you do professionally or personally for people living with memory loss. I'm going to give you all an honorary doctorate today as a physician of the human spirit. Again, thank you very much. And I think with that, Angie, I can just go off my slides. And I think I've kind of hit my mark at about 45 minutes in. And I just wanted to say again, thank you all for participating. If you have any questions, Angie, I guess they're going to put them in the chat room. Is that right? And
Correct.
send them to me. I'll be happy to answer or share any discussion. I'm also welcoming your stories. If you're at Prestige or a family member, please feel free to share your stories. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We appreciate you sharing all this great information for us. And many of these counseling moments we've taken to heart at Prestige as we care for our residents in assisted living and memory care. We do have Tom has his hand up. So, Tom, I'm going to allow you to talk if you would like to ask your question, please.
Hi, Tom. I think you can hold down your space bar too to ask your question on Zoom. Hi, Tom.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I must have inadvertently figured out how to put my hand up.
Okay. No, that's
But
completely fine, Tom. Thank you so much for being on the webinar today.
no, but I think your points are very well taken. So
Appreciate
lots
you.
of tips there.
Thank
Absolutely.
you, Tom. Do you mind sharing your situation if you work in the field or if you're a family member?
Oh, I'm actually the CFO for Prestige, and
Thank you.
um, my parents had 7 years in assisted living before my
Mhm.
father passed. So
Yep, 1 in 3 families. As I said, it's something that hits us all. I live in kind of a more inner city neighborhood in Sacramento, and our lots are small. The houses from 1920s, and I would say easily a third of the people on the maybe 25 houses on my block are involved in caregiving in some capacity, either now or in the past. So we know that that's a big challenge.
Thank you.
great.
Any
Appreciate
other
you.
questions or stories or things people would enjoy sharing? Or
I
Angie, you're certainly welcome to offer some reflections
I do
too.
have some questions that are in
Oh,
the
good. Thank you.
Q&A, and so we'll go through those. Is there any hope to get a parent to move into AL or assisted living if they are resistant? My mom has said that she moved, but when we found her a home or a unit, she always refuses. She is 89 with some dementia. I'm afraid my sister, the primary caregiver, is going to burn out soon. With my mom, she says she'll go in, but my sister believes her, but I think she's just afraid of the change in her mind, and she's going
Mhm.
to change her mind again.
Really powerful question. So, a couple of thoughts I have. You know, basically, in this situation, just a couple of ideas. Number one is certainly talk to the people at that community to get the staff, people like Angie, or because they've had a lot of experience. And they might very well be able to give you some ideas. Some families, for example, will come to the Valentine's party at Prestige or then come to the Mardi Gras party or even do a little respite stay. I think that can be very, very interesting. I think with your mother, sometimes you can just have that very direct conversation. Mom, the doctor says you really cannot live alone anymore. We just need to make this happen. You're gonna, and again, they want to read your emotions. Mom, how exciting for you to have, this lovely team to help you. You've worked hard all your life. You deserve this and great food. And they're going to make your favorite chocolate mousse. And sometimes things like that can be very, very compelling. There are families who, I hate to say it, go for a drive and sort of drop mom off and kind of announce it that way. It's not ideal. But basically, one thought I do have, which might be helpful, is to ask yourself, what would my mother have said about this if we could have talked 30 years ago? If you could say, Mom, here's what the situation might be. You're walking around, Olympia, Washington, disheveled. You're not taking your medicines. People are borrowing money from you. Shouldn't it be? You're all by yourself. The family's so stressed, and your daughter's having health issues. Would you want us to just still keep our commitment to you to be home? Or would you want us to do something? And that idea of what they call substituted judgment can be very powerful. And often caregivers will say, my mother would have really wanted me to make this move, and that can also empower you. So not an easy task, but sometimes involving her directly, getting her okay, other times, sometimes just making the move, blaming the physician, I've had people blame Adult Protective Services. If you genuinely feel it's unsafe for her to be home, I think that can be justifying. I will recommend one resource I like. Called Moving a Relative with Memory Loss by Lori White and Beth Spencer. It's on Amazon. Moving a Relative with Memory Loss, that can give you some good ideas as well.
And David, I would say too, at our prestige communities, we do offer respite services. Maybe you're wanting to take a vacation. We do like to do a minimum of 2 weeks, but we find that it's really beneficial to bring your loved one into our community to spend a couple weeks with us. And if you would be surprised at the number who decide to stay because they've made a good friend. And bringing a resident in, like you said, for a party, having them come in for lunch or participate in one of our wellness activities, all of those things to help them feel comfortable. A couple of our communities have really nice gyms, and maybe they not may not feel well going into a gym to exercise, but maybe with some of the other ladies and gentlemen in our community. We have one of our communities has a tap dance class, and so those kinds of things that might appeal to them and have them come in and participate in an activity, that can be really beneficial. I think we also, some of that gentle deception does have to happen sometimes. And we try to watch that and try to be as truthful as we can. But, sometimes they're at a place with dementia or even just moving into assisted living where it's really scary. And we know it's scary for you too. There's a lot of guilt that goes along with making that decision. But we're here to help you on that. And I know I'm going through it with my own mom right now and my sister who's a primary caregiver. And it's really difficult and trying to remember all of those things that we do. And so I really encourage you as you're looking at those options, keep a journal, write down those things that are concerning to you, the questions you have, because sometimes they're there and then you get so caught up in the situation, the emotions, it's hard to recall what those things are. And so keep a journal of those things to help you along that way with making those decisions. It's really beneficial to you and to your loved one as well.
Thank you, Angie. I'll just quickly support the idea of respite care because sometimes you could say, Mom, I need to be going to this family event in Maine, or I need to do this, or I'm having, medical issues or whatever. And the doctor insists you cannot be by yourself while your sister, while the siblings are off to this thing. And we're going to try it for a couple weeks or a month, and that can be very, very helpful. Thank you, Angie.
Yeah,
Next question.
and I would also say too, if financial is something that is really scary for you too, of the cost of senior living, come talk with us. We can work through that. Many of our communities, especially our memory cares, do have Medicaid options, but also we have some other things that we process and we work through if you're trying to sell a home or all those things that come up around that conversation. We are here to help
Mhm.
you with those answers too. David, our next question is my mom is 89 and we are moving up to Oregon and she will be living in a prestige facility. And we do like to call them communities too. And so it is a community of wonderful neighbors. And so right now, she has not had interest in taking care of herself or being social. And she won't brush her teeth. And we have to talk to her about getting into a shower once a week. I don't want to push her, and I don't know how much I should push her. I asked why she doesn't want to participate in taking care of herself, and she always just answers, "Well, I'm lazy." I feel like I should be doing something more to get her to do these things, but I just don't know.
Very interesting. Well, I think people do with dementia, sometimes their personal care really suffers. They're just not aware that, they might have a body odor or aware that, they need this. They may think they brushed their teeth an hour ago when they haven't done it for 3 days. One trick I have is to sort of model it, like do it with them. So maybe you say, Mom, let's brush our teeth, and you actually are brushing together, and you sometimes have to put the brush in their hand, put the toothpaste on it, and kind of almost get them started. They kind of lose that start button. Um, but it can be a struggle. Yeah. I mean, we at Prestige, giving people showers, some people do well and some people don't. What I would say is try to set the stage for success, be really organized, like if you are trying to do the brushing teeth, have everything all set out there. Maybe play some music ahead of time, talk about a favorite thing, Mom. I hear that the ice cream shop you love has two scoops for the price of one on Wednesdays, and let's go, but we want to get spiffed up, or your nephew might come by. Having that light touch, I think, again, if you can have that sort of humor and empathy versus you have to do this, that can very much help. At Prestige, I would say, like a lot of senior living providers, there are people, our staff are trained and they have some confidence. We try to break the ice. I might say, "Oh, Miss Angie, look at those great glasses you have on." By the way, they are great glasses, Angie. But talk about or the color you're wearing, or talk about What's this I hear that you were the mayor of Walla Walla, Washington? Mr. Mayor, what an honor to meet you. Kind of that social history piece can be very, very helpful. And then we can, work hard to get those personal care items done.
Yeah. And
But
I
it is very challenging, very challenging.
It is. And I think also with dementia or any kind of cognitive decline, our loved ones tend to forget the steps or where to start. And it's like putting them in a room that's full of things, and you say, organize this and put it everywhere, and they just don't even know where to start. Sometimes we don't either. But I think taking those small steps, like David said, helping with toothbrushing, helping setting things up before a shower, making sure the water's warm and all the towels and the change of clothing and all of that is there, and just helping them through each step and maybe talking through the step with them. We find ourselves doing that quite often, and it's very beneficial. It's with any activity. It can be dining, it can be any of that. And maybe they've forgotten the steps on washing their own clothes and all those things, just to take it in steps. And sometimes pictures
Mm-hmm.
help a lot too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I have another question that came in as well, David. We've recently been touring a memory care community, and they are all shared apartments. How do you feel about sharing an apartment with someone else?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that need to do that?
That's what a great question. My mother, when she was in memory care, had a shared apartment as well, but there were like you walked into a little foyer and there was like a room to the right, room to the left, and they shared the bathroom. So it wasn't like a little pony wall. But here's the thing. In a good memory care program, they're not in their rooms all that much. I mean, they're out and about in the community doing things, etc. And hopefully they're in their own bedrooms more to take a nap or to sleep in the evening. So I think with the shared rooms, there's obviously pros and cons. You have to count on the building to really have a good match, make sure that it's just fine. I think financially those can be very beneficial because I know here in Sacramento, one of my friends has made a placement. I think the shared room was like $1,800 a month cheaper, and that's a lot of money over 12 months in terms of extended care. So I'd say you want to make sure the building's good about matching, thinking about personalities, that there's that safety factor there, and that they are out of the rooms quite a bit. So shared rooms. I think my personal choice is if you can afford it, have a private room. But believe it or not, the shared rooms have worked well. And like I say, my mother, even though it wasn't like a pony wall, she became friendly with her next door neighbor and would have tea together and have meals together. And there are times with some people where that can be comforting to be with someone there. So it definitely is an option you consider. Don't be afraid of it. See, talk with the staff, see what you think.
And many of our communities do have shared apartments. And we have found out too that people who share a room tend to sleep better at night. They may have grown up sharing an apartment or a room, a bedroom with a sibling. They may have been in close quarters in the military, maybe in a dorm situation at college. And so it's really not as uncomfortable for them as it is for us today, and how
Mhm.
we like to be by ourselves and everything. But I think it actually can be a positive when you have someone else there
Very
that you
good.
know is going to watch out for your needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is interesting. I think some of it is really, as you say, Andy, more about us than about them. My own mother, we decorated her room, what's the old saying, to the nines. We had brought in paintings and her furniture and this and that. I mean, it looked like a magazine, right, of all of her stuff. I don't think she noticed it. I
Mm.
mean, I think she has some visual spatial issues, and I don't think she ever really noticed it. I mean, it was so interesting to me. I think her friends and family did. We noticed it. We liked it, but it was not. It really. I think we could have just kept it very simple. Obviously, made it pleasant, and it would have probably had the same effect. So you kind of have to begin to let go of some of these old ideas of moving with your family member. It's tough.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Other
David,
questions in?
You also, someone asked about what things should I be keeping track of before my mom moves into a community. And I think we've worked together for a long time around life story. And so Prestige developed my life story many years ago. A lot of senior living communities do that. It's something that we really focus on, getting to know who your loved one is. What are those things that are important to them? Are they an early riser? Do they like to read the newspaper, have a cup of coffee? How do they like their coffee? All of those things add into that person, that we take care of. And our goal is to personally touch lives every day at Prestige. And so when we learn those key things about your loved ones as they're coming in, we can set them up with a friend or a resident ambassador to help them
Mhm.
feel comfortable in a dining room situation. Maybe they're afraid of that. But we also learn how to be specific about engagement. And you talked about Joyce and her mom and calling her nurse Jackie
Mhm.
or Joyce or whatever.
Mhm.
Those kinds of things are really beneficial, whether it's assisted living or memory care, to get to know your loved one in those ways. And so I really encourage everyone. I think I even do it in my life. I call it my memory queue of keeping track of things in my history that my family would want to know about,
Mhm.
the stories of our past, but also those things that make me comfortable today. And so I think really working hard on that as you begin that step forward. And then just come in and take a look. Talk to us. We are happy to talk anytime. And if you have questions, questions are great. We learn something new every day with questions. And so
Yep.
I think some of the stuff you shared today, David, has been really
Thank you.
pointing towards that, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Oh, we do have one more question that came in. Hold on here. My mom has a lot of difficulties in the bathroom, the spatial areas of our home bathroom. What can be done differently to help her? We find that she falls frequently in the bathroom. Anything you can help us with, particularly with that space?
Well, one thing you might even want to consider, is the Alzheimer's Association has a lot of good handouts and things, including some around your home. So one thought I have is, just sort of just doing some basic thinking about the space. Like, is it well lit? Are there contrasts? Like, let's say the toilet bowl is white, the walls are white, the lid is white. She might not even be able to see it.
Mm.
So I'd put a contrasting color, like a red or black seat on the toilet. Maybe paint the backdrop a different color. Sometimes putting up some signage, even like, can be helpful for some people as well. Having that night light, giving her those cues, all of that can be very, very helpful. Again, sometimes you just see the white on white and white and white, and they just can't see it as well. But yes, very, very challenging. Again, if you can adapt to get one of those taller toilets, that can be very helpful. Again, of course, with the grab bars. So the environmental piece, I think, is very important. But sadly, assuming you've done all that and she's still having issues, again, the sequencing can be so difficult, and of course, just even their physical movement, the fall risk can be helpful. I know Prestige, like a lot of organizations, really works hard to work with physical therapists, work with folks to work on the fall prevention. But falls are really a big enemy of people with dementia. One quick tip is talk to your mom's physician because the physician might very well could order a round of physical therapy or occupational therapy, and Medicare will often pay for at least some of those sessions. And that can be helpful for her to build her strength, but also for that PT or OT to give you some tips.
Thank you. And many of our prestige communities do have black toilet seats for that differentiation.
Mhm.
And then I do have one last question here. My dad we lost my mom 8 years ago, and my dad frequently asks, "Where's my mom? Where's my
Mm.
mom?" What's the best answer? Do I tell him all the time that she has passed away, or do I make it somewhat easier? I don't want to lie to him.
Wow, great question. And there may not be one answer, but I've kind of evolved in my thinking. Years ago, people say, "Oh, he's probably playing golf somewhere," but that doesn't feel very good. And people with dementia can often remember if you've been disingenuous with them. So, a couple thoughts. I mean, one is you can say something like, "Gosh, Mom, isn't it incredible? But Dad died 6 years ago. I just can't believe it's been that long." And then take a beat. Isn't it great that he got two hole-in-ones in his lifetime? That was one of his biggest dreams. Do you think he's maybe up in heaven playing golf right now? Now, again, what you've done there is you've told the truth, but you've also planted kind of a positive memory, your dad's love of golf or hitting the hole-in-one, his lifetime dream. And your mother might still kind of cry a little bit and say, "No one told me," which is very painful. But it is a way of kind of bringing in that the ability to reminisce and do something happy. Another technique is not to tell the truth per se, but just ask some questions. Like, let's say Angie says, "Oh, where's grandmother?" And I don't know her grandmother. I might say, "Well, remind me, is she a blonde or brunette or redhead? Does she live in the city or the country? Is she a good cook? When you were little, was she very strict? And sometimes just having them talk about the person, tell me more about that or more about that person kind of allows them to kind of emote. And then you can say something like, I'm not sure, Angie, where your grandmother is, but she sounds like she's a really wonderful lady. And that's another kind of way of kind of finessing it as well. But I do think sometimes starting with the truth, putting it in a kind of a more life-affirming context can be good. Of course, if 10 minutes later they ask the same question and they get agitated, you might say, gosh, I'm not really sure, but that rascal, maybe he's, again, maybe he's playing golf or probably at his office working. I do think we're forgiven for these little fibs when we're doing it in the person's best interest.
I agree. I agree. Well, that is all of our questions for today, David. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much, everybody. It's great to be with you all. And Angie, thank you as always for hosting this. And best wishes to my friends at Prestige and for all the rest of you on the call.
Thank you so much. And if you would like to look in further, please visit our website at prestigecare.com and you can track through to all of our different locations. There are some blogs out there. And so please find your way there and work your way through it. And once again, our phone number is on there if you need to call and ask questions too. We're happy to help. So thanks so
Thanks.
much for joining us. And the recording of this will be sent out along with a copy of David's slides in the next day or two. Thank you so much. Have a great day.